So we have also not only a panelist missing, we have the chair who could not fly out to us because very bad weather that he got. But we never stop. We try our best. So we got a video from him that is going to be welcoming you all. And he will address you all in a virtual video way. So we're having that video to run now. If we can have the video, gentlemen.
Hello, Kuwait. It's Lawrence Wintermeyer from Ellipsis. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. I'm speaking to you from my home office in Oslo, Norway. Congratulations on the Central Bank FinTech Sandbox. It is definitely a critical tool in the development of any FinTech ecosystem. I would like to leave you with two observations that we've seen in the global market today that I think are perfectly suited to Kuwait and the strength you have of developing your FinTech ecosystem. The first is the rise of digital assets and the blockchain, and the opportunity to really compress costs and make information much more transparent in securities, commodities, properties, and managed futures, and really taking advantage of the heritage of the financial services industry that Kuwait has. This is definitely something that you want to pay attention to in this market. The second area is impact investing. My partner and I, Abdul Hasib, have spent quite a bit of time this year, not just at the United Nations with the Sustainable Development Goals, but speaking in ethical finance and impact investing. There's no question that this is an area that Kuwait has a natural advantage. The Kuwait Fund, which I believe was launched in 1961, is really a beacon to all of us in impact investing on how benevolent and beneficial funds can help develop economies. We think that the role that Kuwait has to play in the future of impact investing of the next 10 to 15 years will be critical to the global economy. Thanks for the time. I'm really sorry I can't be there, and I hope you have a great conference, but I do look forward to catching up sometime over the next 6 months and seeing you all in person. Thank you.
So thank you for having him virtually. So I leave the floor to you. You can introduce yourselves and you take the lead on this. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for having us in Kuwait and at the... Can you hear me now? Yep. Okay. Thank you for having us in Kuwait and at the GIF. I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself and then ask my panelists to also introduce themselves. And the topic of our session today is the state of fintech globally and locally. My name is Abdul Hasib Basit. I'm co-founder and principal at a firm called Ellipsis. My background is I spent a decade career in conventional finance working for tier 1 banks, predominantly in the UK. I then left 5 years ago to start the FinTech Association in the UK, which was the brainchild of the former Prime Minister David Cameron's policy unit. It was a privilege to serve for that organisation and really represent the UK as FinTech was evolving in the UK. I've since left that to start my own firm, but I'm also involved in a number of other initiatives, namely a not-for-profit organisation called Global Digital Finance, which is focused on crypto assets and codes of conduct and standards around crypto assets globally. We're working with 220 firms in the crypto asset space and also with 30 global regulators. And I'm also the chairman of a Islamic fintech called Yielders, which was founded in the UK 4 years ago, which is a marketplace for alternative assets focused on the UK property sector. That's me. I'll now introduce my panelists. Tariq Al-Husseini from the Central Bank of Kuwait. Would you like to give us a bit of your background, Tariq?
Sure. My name is Tariq Al-Husseini. I'm heading the digitalization and strategy in Central Bank of Kuwait. Currently, we are part of the team of Central Bank that we are working hard on to digital transfer the financial sector here in Kuwait, whether working with the banks or working with the fintechs overall. Prior to this post and Central Bank of Kuwait, I used to work in the National Bank of Kuwait, NBK, as head of digitalization and innovation. We were in charge and part of the team that we led the team to revamp their mobile application, online channels, and all of the interaction teller machines that was put into place. Prior to NBK also, I was part of the Kuwait Credit Bank family, where we was the first all-digital bank built in Kuwait in that aspect of it, where we shrank all the operation, we digitalized them and shrank the time from days to seconds in order to get your loan approved. So this is a little bit about this. And as of my education background, I graduated from Oregon State University with Bachelor of Science degree in computer science.
Thank you. So we have one side of the panel which is from the regulatory space and from a incumbent banking background. The other side we have Ali Abul Hassan, the founder of Tap Payments, one of the most predominant fintechs in Kuwait. Ali, would you like to give us some of your background?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. As mentioned, my name is Ali Abul Hassan. I'm the co-founder of Tap Payments. I've been working in the payment industry for over 10 years. I've been exposed to payments in different sectors, starting from the oil sector, telecom sector, and the banking sector, till I decided to initiate or found Tap Payments, and exploring how to simplify online payments, starting with Kuwait and the region. We believe in basically connecting markets together, closing down on any friction that is available for players in the market to accept payments or perform payments. So that's what we're trying to achieve with Tap. A little background about myself. Prior to my working experience is studying in the United States and San Francisco.
Thank you very much. So obviously my experience of fintech is from the Western markets and more what we would call developed fintech hubs. What we've seen in the last 10 years is, after the financial crisis, a number of initiatives that were launched by regulators, by governments in those markets to really encourage competition and innovation. And at the same time, we had a lot of folks coming out of conventional banking after the financial crisis looking for alternative careers in finance. And with the rise of the tech sectors in those economies, we saw a natural opportunity in the fintech space. With the experience that these folks have and the prevalence of technology, not least the sort of introduction of the smartphone around 2008 and mobile penetration generally in those markets. That's really been the drivers for fintech in those markets. So, Tariq, first question to you. I mean, can you give us a bit more of a view as to what's the current state of fintech in Kuwait? We've heard from the governor of the central bank that there's around 60 fintechs and quite a lot of investment in the space. What's been the driving force behind it, and what's a central bank's view on fintech generally?
Actually, central bank view on the fintech phenomenon is really, we are proud to see our entrepreneurs and our youth involved in this spectrum or this economy currently. As you stated, fintech is going to be part of the new economy, whether it's digital and in the financial sector for overall. And central bank has been monitoring this development and this phenomena that's happening for the past years. And we've been monitoring closely and encouraging people to work in. We've used the approach of handoff in the beginning. But recently, when we saw the maturity of it and the development of it, that we issued our new regulation, which is the e-payment regulation that will regulate the fintech and regulate the payment spectrum inside the Kuwait. In essence, it's multi-tier, and this is something very unique for a regulator that will issue a regulation that's multi-tier. It's not one size fits all, in order to encourage the phenomena of the fintech in Kuwait to expand more and more. At the same time, we need, as a regulator here in Kuwait, we are responsible for safeguarding our current financial system, and the regulation address that, and plus give them an mobility for the fintech in order to innovate and to open up all that.
Okay, and so Ali, I guess as a pioneer in the space and somebody who launched a number of years ago, some of the initiatives we heard about from the governor earlier on weren't around when you were launching. So, for example, the strategy around payments, certainly the strategy around Sandbox, which is very new, announced yesterday. How has your experience been of launching a fintech in that environment where there wasn't really an enabling infrastructure for you? And how does that compare with having taken what you've built across the region? And how does Kuwait compare in comparison to others?
Well, being a first mover in any industry, you need to have the approach of being prepared for any future requirements or expectations from the market, the stakeholders, or the players, let's say. But that should not stop you from actually moving forward. You need to be prepared. It's like if I'm talking about another industry. If you're talking, for example, about Uber. Uber works and expands globally in many markets where they're not even regulated with transportation, but they go along and they contribute with regulation. And that's kind of similar to the approach that we take from our end. We try to understand regulators. We try to understand the stakeholders that are placed in every market that we work in. Being part of the Middle East, we're a very fragmented market, meaning every market is regulated separately. Every market has its own ecosystem. Every market has its own players. So what we try to do is understand every market and contribute to that market. It's basically playing two roles. One role is running a startup and actually proving that your product actually works for the market. That's one strategy. Another strategy should be complementing the existing setup and the existing ecosystem and contributing to it and educating it. Because in general, innovation comes in and it works in markets where regulation is not catching up with it yet. And that's where real innovation comes. If we wait for regulation to be set up before you innovate, it becomes too late. But you need to be prepared to be regulated and always opening discussions with regulators and markets that you try to innovate in. I hope that clarifies at least our approach.
It does, thank you. Before we move on to the next question, you'll see above us we've got a link to Slido, and we've got some questions. So please access those and answer them, and we'll have a look at the results afterwards. They're predominantly focused around where Kuwait's strengths are as a fintech ecosystem, the types of innovations you would like to see as consumers, and which parts of the financial sector we think have the most to gain from them. So you can see some of the results coming up as you start voting, but we'll review them at the end. So moving back to you, Tariq, the sandbox strategy was announced yesterday. Can you give us a flavour of what that entails from your perspective, and how does it fit into Kuwait's ambitions around fintech? And really, as a regulator, what are you most keen to see develop as the technologies that come into the sandbox?
As a regulator and as a financial regulator, we'd like to see more and more of the fintech phenomena happening. Hence, I mean, like Mr. Ali just stated, he had to go through struggling in that aspect of it. So we saw that, and we saw the experience that they had, this enormous experience. As Mr. Ali stated, that he became now a regional power. So there is some of the fintech that we have in Kuwait that we are really proud of them. They became a regional power, not just a local Kuwaiti power. So Central Bank of Kuwait said, okay, now we have enough record to prove that we have a sound fintech economy and funds in the ecosystem, and we want to improve that and want to encourage that even more. So hence we created the Sandbox Initiative. I mean, this is not just a Kuwaiti Sandbox Initiative, Central Bank, and also we are connecting onto the global initiative of sandboxing, whether corresponding with another banks, a global centralized bank throughout the globe in their aspect of it. And we'd like to capitalize on Mr. Ali's achievement and what they have done in their company in order to bring that expertise within our sandboxing. So the sandboxing is to just check what's, is it sound proposal? Is it that they have the right technical aspect is being addressed? Is this is a financial system that's willing to be moved into the financial sector of Kuwait or not? And we advise the people. And of course, we're going to encourage the people like Mr. Ali and other in the fintech, the Kuwaiti fintech spectrum to join us on the Sandbox Initiative in order to mentor the next generation that's coming in, and in order to improve it and have secure, sound fintech economy in Kuwait.
So, Ali, I guess you've already assumed that role as the known sort of entrepreneur in this space around mentoring and partnering with other firms that emerge. What's your advice to somebody? We're at GUST today. There may be some entrepreneurs here that are thinking about launching a fintech business when they leave education. What's your advice to them? How do they get started? What are some of the traps that they need to avoid, and what are some of the advantages that exist now that maybe didn't exist when you were around?
Well, at the time when we started, we didn't have any hands, at least, or a network that can help us pick up ourselves and move. We had to build the whole rail ourselves. We had to put every milestone ourselves and build it one step at a time. What is another important thing that to be considered when you're building a fintech is there has to be some kind of background in financial services. How does the financial service industry work? How does it move? How does it evolve? Fintech companies do not work similar to tech companies. We kind of hear a lot about like founders that are within the e-commerce, let's say, field, going into fintech. Fintech and e-commerce are completely different industries. There's a lot of, in e-commerce, you can do a lot of innovation, but it's more commerce related, it's more market related. Where it's in fintech, you have a lot of industry history into it. There is a lot of players that are evolving with compliance and regulation. So keeping in mind that fintech is not pure tech, and at the same time, if there was no rail to actually build, you built it yourself. But today, let me say, in Kuwait or growing also in the region, the railway is actually built. It's not 100% built, but the grounds are done. Fintech should listen. Okay, new fintech should listen to the experiences of existing fintechs. And existing fintechs should lay down the grounds for others to emerge and for others to grow. That's what we've been trying to do as initiatives from our activities within the ecosystem. That's why we have been a founding member of Bahrain Fintech Bay, which is a fintech initiative in Bahrain on a national level. Of course, we are now very happy to see that the Central Bank of Kuwait, what the great thing that has been done with the Central Bank of Kuwait is, as Mr. Tariq said, is that they've opened up the market. Let the fintech start. And it's good that a central bank doesn't put setups from the beginning to help fintechs actually explore and put down the groundwork and understand how the market is moving. But the next step becomes where initiatives happens from regulators or industry players or fintech founders or companies to help the industry by assisting others coming into the industry. And we should not be afraid of competition. We should be collaborative. Competition is not Kuwait. Competition is international. Where does Kuwait play internationally in the whole fintech spectrum in general? So that's why we've been involved with initiatives in Bahrain. We've been involved with initiatives in Saudi Arabia with the central bank over there, SAMA. We've been involved with initiatives in Abu Dhabi and Dubai with Abu Dhabi Global Markets, ADGM, and the IFC. So we kind of look at the bigger picture. The next step is Egypt. So we've actually sat down the Central Bank of Egypt. So why do we do this? Because we want to help at least build our mission for ourselves, but also at the same time help companies that are interested in elevating within fintechs. At the end, moving forward is not about accomplishing all of this. It's about the time of accomplishing it. It took us 5 years to reach where we are today. In the future, a company that could achieve what we've achieved should be done in less than 1 year. Should not take 5 years. That's a choice that we took from our end to start a company from Kuwait within the Middle East. If we chose to take the easy route, we could have set up the company in California. And we would have had a much bigger global exposure. But we believe in what the region has potential. We believe in how we can contribute to the region and how to play a role within Kuwait.
Thank you. So the one voice that's possibly missing on this panel is somebody representing the incumbent banking sector in Kuwait. So So Tariq, sorry, with your background coming from banks, what role do you think banks have to play in innovation within fintech, and how would the regulator like to see them participate?
Exactly. As from a regulator perspective, as His Excellency the Governor today announced, that Central Bank of Kuwait is opening an innovation lab. And the main purpose of this innovation lab today is to close this bridge between the conventional or Islamic banking and the fintech phenomena that's happening. And in order to bring them all to the table, elevate the education level of the fintech so they can speak the language of banks, and bring down the language of the banker so in order to communicate with the fintech. We'll sit down with each of the bank and each of the fintech parties to develop their IDs, to make sure that it's financially sound, to make sure that it's regulatory sound, and eventually we are trying to move them back to move them up the ladder to the sandboxing initiative in order to really to test this ID that they have into place. We'd like to be the partner, the missing link between the current banking sector and the financial and the fintech economy that's currently happening in order to build the new digital crew.
Excellent. And I guess, Ali, from your side, you're obviously in the payment space, so work quite closely with the banks. What's your experience been like working with Kuwaiti banks, working with GCC banks? What are some of the lessons you've learned, and what are some of the things they've had to evolve in order to be able to work with fintech?
So the positive thing that has been happening today, banks are very much interested in working with fintechs. 5 years ago, it was completely, fintech was something new for banks. Banks didn't know whether, is it competition, is it complementing? Does it help the industry, or does it disrupt the industry in a negative way or a positive way? In the past, let's say a year and a half or 2 years, the approach of banks have changed. There are many successful stories of fintechs with banks in Europe, in the US, and the Far East. And we believe banks in Kuwait and in the region are realizing this, and they want to work with fintechs. But what is happening today, banks are trying to figure out how to work with fintechs. Where is the role of a fintech? A fintech company and the people within fintech companies should not expect the banks to tell the fintech company where is their role. It should be the other way around. Why do I say that? Because banks are fintechs. They are fintechs of the 20th century. They are basically structured for a very long number of years, and they work as fintechs for their era. Now, the future of banking system is specialized fintechs. Specialized fintechs are the fintechs of the 21st century, where we need to realize how we would be complementing to banks. And we advise where is our role, and then find a complementary partnership there. And that's what we've achieved. We've achieved to do so the first bank fintech partnership, and we're very happy to say that it was started in Kuwait, and it's the first of its kind all over the Middle East and within the payment spectrum. And we did that with Bobian Bank. So what we've signed with Bobian Bank recently in Q3 of this year is a strategic partnership where we can assist within our vertical of payments within fintech to support Bobian Bank and work closely in elevating payment technology within the banking sector and how to elevate it to a next step. We have done similarly also in another angle aside from Bobian Bank with the National Bank of Kuwait, where today the National Bank of Kuwait have adopted technologies that we have been deploying into the market, and they have embedded them into their whole flow. In addition to that, there are other banks in Kuwait that are opening up the markets for fintech. And a big player of that is the Commercial Bank of Kuwait, which opened up and works with a lot of fintechs to explore, basically. So banks do want to work with fintechs today, and regulators are aware about that. The central bank wants to open that. But the mindset of a fintech is you go to a bank, but you need to have a good roadmap and always expect that there is a big possibility that the people in the bank doesn't mean that if you go to them, that means they're going to accept it. It doesn't. You need to try once. You need to try twice. You need to find and talk the language of banks. You need to know how to fit it within the industry of banking. At the end, fintechs are coming in and they're new. The banking industry is really old. It's over hundreds of years. Okay? So we need to figure out how to complement to it. We need to elevate it and innovate with it by complying with the existing language. That's how we see it at the end.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a couple more questions and then open it up to audience questions. So if you have any questions, please think of them now, and we'll come to you in a moment. I think looking outside of Kuwait, looking beyond, looking into the region and beyond the region, Kuwait's always played a big part historically in exporting Islamic finance. If you look at some of the most successful Islamic finance institutions around the world, they have some sort of Kuwaiti heritage. Kuwait itself has a very even distribution of conventional Islamic banks, good penetration of Islamic finance assets within as compared to conventional finance, and what only I think the largest only second to Saudi. And so, what do you think? How do you think Kuwait is really positioned for more ethical Islamic finance? The governor spoke about sustainability as one of the core areas that the central bank is looking at. How do you think that that Kuwait is positioned, especially when we think about things like inclusion, which was another one of his points, where predominantly of the 1.8 billion people that the World Bank recognizes as being unbanked, a large majority of those are in Muslim countries. What is the role that Kuwait has on the global stage to play?
Thank you for saying that about Kuwait. Yes, as you stated, Kuwait is pioneer in the Islamic banking, and they set the foundation for the Islamic banking in Kuwait and globally in the region. From central bank perspective, yes, we'd like to see the next generation, the youth that's currently today in the market, and from fintech perspective, that they take this flag and continue running with it within the fintech spectrums. At Central Bank of Kuwait, we're doing everything we can in order to encourage them to do that. As today, we have launched all the initiatives to start up and kick off the 2019 as the fintech year for Central Bank of Kuwait, as the digitalization year for Central Bank of Kuwait. And Islamics is one of the core pillars. We're not ignoring the other side of it, is the conventional, but both of them. But yes, we encourage the youth today, and we encourage the fintech, who's working in that spectrum. Don't forget the Islamic. We've been pioneer here in Kuwait in the Islamic. Let's take it to the fintech phenomena. And central bank is having multiple doors you can knock on us, not just into the local banks. You have the innovation lab that was announced today. If you have an idea as Islamic ID, please by all means knock on our innovation lab, and we're more than happy to welcome you. If you think that you have developed an ID and it's already packaged as a system, please knock on the sandboxing initiative. And trust me, that from the governor and every employee that we have in the central bank, you'll find us with an open arm when it's come to the Islamic, as this is something we have it very dearly in our heart in Kuwait.
I think that's really encouraging. From my perspective, I work in Islamic finance, Islamic fintech quite broadly in Europe and the US, and it's really encouraging that it's not an afterthought. It's actually core and integral to what you're doing here in Kuwait, and we really see the benefit of that. I think to give you a broader context, in Europe we have, depending on whether you count Russia or not, you have somewhere between 30 to 60 million Muslims who are largely ignored by the conventional finance sector and have been so since the financial crisis, are really crying out for Islamic finance services. And it's not only the banks, but it's actually the fintechs that have really brought that to the fore again in the last few years. Yes, thank you so much. I will take those. Yeah.
It's being voted, so the top ones has the.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So just before we take those questions, and Ali, you said that you've built the rails for finance using using technology, and it's really what you build on top of that could be conventional or Islamic. Again, going back to that question about what do you see your role has been taking Kuwait fintech as a brand across the region and now wider than the region into North Africa. What do you think the role of Kuwait fintech is on a global stage?
Well, building a fintech ecosystem goes down in many layers. There is a lot of verticals in them. The focus of where we're actually trying to solve is the payment angle within fintech. Fintech comes in from lending to regtech to insurtech to microfinancing, and Islamic fintech plays into such type of some of those verticals. The way we're moving basically is solving the transactional part, which is the payment angle of things. It's where the actual core initial first step of any fintech ecosystem is actually built. And it's usually not only because we chose it, it's by default. Any fintech ecosystem globally, it starts out from the transactional payment setup first. So this comes by default. Once that emerges, and that's what we have achieved so far, is closing the gaps that are available within the transactional payment ecosystem from Kuwait to Saudi Arabia to Bahrain to UAE to Qatar to Oman, and then moving into North Africa. Basically, what we have laid down is assisting the transactional flows of this vertical. Now, future fintechs can contribute into this vertical, or they can actually build on top of it. And this is where real fintech innovation starts going in another level, whether it is in microfinancing. Because let's say future fintechs should think about even big data and how to deal with analytics and how to deal with instant credit. The future of any payment, let's say, and how it plays into all of those angles is, today we have a credit card, for example, and we have a debit card. A debit card, you get your funds from your current account, and your credit card, you get it because of an extended line of credit from the bank. But the future is, it could be one, where you get instant credit based on the type of transaction you're actually committing for a specific purchase, whether it's purchasing for groceries or for gas stations or purchasing some luxury item. And that is where real fintech innovation is going to come in. And that plays a big role into reaching that stage by having fintechs focusing in lending, fintechs focusing in microfinancing, fintechs focusing in electronic KYCing and regulation tech and insurtech. All of that plays a big role into reaching towards such type of fintech experience, whether it is Islamic or non-Islamic. And when you mentioned about how Kuwait is playing a big role or trying to be a role in Islamic, we have Kuwait Finance House. It is one of the oldest and who innovated with Islamic finance and Islamic banking. And it has grown all the way to the Far East. So Kuwait has a big head start with Islamic banking. Now adopting fintech, and I believe KFH is actually looking into innovating within fintechs as they are taking such initiatives today by adopting technologies into their vision of spreading Islamic banking, basically. So there is a lot of future with Kuwait there.
Thank you. Before we go to the audience questions, we're just going to take a look at the results on Slido, if we can see them. Right, okay, that's the questions. Let's go to them, and then we'll bring up the Slido poll at the end. So the first question, or the most popular question, is around. Just bear with me a moment. Sorry, this is not my phone, so I just need to unlock it. Can you give us a view as to how the sandbox really fits into the central bank's overall business strategy now? Is that the only way you're looking to engage with fintechs, or are there other avenues that you're exploring as well?
No, actually, there's 3 doors that any fintech can knock in a central bank door. If you have already made package and you have the agreement between you and the bank, you just simply have to file for in central bank a filing that's normal. Any institution will file, whether it was exchange houses or it was other financial institutions that we regulate and we oversee. If you are already made, please, by all means, just knock on that door and submit your application. When it comes to people or solution that's really challenging and really wouldn't like to see it experimented as something it's very innovative and we've never seen before, this is when they can come and knock on the sandboxing initiative. And they can knock on the door. They will be taken to 4 stages. We'll first then sit down, they submit the application, we're going to sit down with them, evaluate the solution, and if we see the fund, and we encourage him to bring a demo with him into place, and the working demo that we can do a proof of concept on, and then we'll run it in our test environment to ensure that it's sound and to meet all the requirements, and then he will get the sealed of approval of Central Bank of Kuwait on that aspect of it, where he can market it anywhere he likes into it. If there is something that was not yet developed and there is no proof of concept of it, it's just an idea, he wants to explore it, he can knock on the Innovation Lab door, where we can more than welcome to sit down with him, explain to him what's the financing in, whether it's Islamic financing, will bring him expertise from the market that they are pioneering the Islamic. If conventional, we bring conventional. If somebody, in the payment spectrum, we're going to bring them. If he's somebody from the fintech, he don't know what to do, I think we know who to call. And that spectrum, and we're going to be helping them out in order to build this sound fintech phenomena and sound fintech economy in Kuwait.
And so, by the looks of the next question, you'll probably have a lot of people knocking on your door, because it's asking, when are you expecting to implement open banking in Kuwait and regulations like crowdfunding platforms? Are these on your radar at the moment?
It is on our radar, and as we saw that Kuwait, we are not a follower. As we saw in the financial, Islamic financial spectrum, or the conventional and the fintech phenomenon that we have here, we are the leading the region in fintech, and we don't follow. So Open Banks Initiative is a following, going to follow someone. We are sure about our youth, and we are sure about our people here in Kuwait, that they're going to find something will make it easier for everybody to bank, to be easier to do a transaction, and they are most welcome to come approach us on that. As to do an open banking initiative and be a follower, I don't think this is the Kuwaiti way to do things.
Thank you. Ali, question for you. In your experience of launching in other countries, what's the sort of the best thing that you've experienced from other countries that you would like to see brought back to Kuwait that's made it easier for you as a fintech?
It's every country has its own pros and cons, so there isn't a better experience, let's just say. I believe what's good about Kuwait is that we're a market that you can test in. We have the market demand. The consumers will try, and it's a market that is very demanding, is not happy with any type of service. So starting in Kuwait is something that's very important. It gives you a head start over any other market. Yes, you don't have the size of Egypt or Saudi Arabia, but it's a good launching pad. That's what I can say. When it comes down to fintech, as Mr. Tariq said, the central bank is opening to let fintechs explore, which is a very great approach of learning from the behavior instead of blocking it before it starts, which is what I see. The biggest number of active fintechs in the region are actually evolving from Kuwait. We see the fintechs that are in the UAE, we see the fintechs that are in Saudi and in Bahrain and in Oman and Qatar and Egypt. Egypt is on a different scale because of it's a different setup, as it's underbanked. GCC is very highly banked, so it's a little different. But what I'm trying to say is Kuwait already has a very healthy environment to launch. It has a very good approach as a central bank, as a regulator, into dealing with such type of activities. What I think, the only thing that, and we had a little talk with Mr. Tariq earlier, that what needs to be at least given as recognition for the verticals of fintech, and just being considered for internal purpose, knowing exactly that fintech is many verticals. So when we come in as a company that is focused in payments, what are the verticals that we're actually innovating with? Is it only in payments, or is it in any other layer? Many companies that come in within fintech, they think fintech first, let's say earlier this year, it's cryptocurrency or it's blockchain, which is completely it's not right to say that it is not, but it is only one angle of fintech. And it's an industry of itself. There are so many verticals. So recognizing every specific vertical within fintech and giving some kind of guidance if it's available. So now with payments, it's becoming clear, or much clearer than before here in Kuwait. Within other types of verticals within fintech, it does require clarity, at least dividing things. Why is this important? Because every vertical depends on one another. It is, in our case, we did a lot of verticals because we had no choice, and we come from the financial industry as a background. That's why we prepared ourselves. But not every fintech is ready to actually explore all the different verticals. They can't grow that fast. That's why it took us a few years. But to grow really fast is to specialize in one vertical and complement other verticals within fintech. And this is what I would just request to be considered from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you. The next question is about what difference has Islamic finance made to foreign banks in Europe and the US, and did it solve the economic crisis? Perhaps this is one that I can take. So I think we saw after the turn of the century, we saw a lot of conventional banks opening up Islamic windows, a lot of investment going into standalone Islamic banks in Europe and the US. And what we saw after the economic crisis is, unfortunately, a lot of those sort of Islamic windows closed, even though they were actually being run as profitable operations. What we've seen since is really what we would describe as a missed opportunity. The Islamic finance space in Europe and the US really had an opportunity to demonstrate itself as being as something that stands apart from conventional finance and the risks within conventional finance. And I think that was an opportunity that we didn't capitalize on. And so that's where we now see fintechs bringing that narrative back into finance and becoming more ethical, sustainable. And what we naturally see is a lot of them aren't branded overtly as Sharia compliant. They use English names rather than Arabic names. They position themselves for the mass market. They don't necessarily market themselves as Islamic, even though the underlying principles are Sharia compliant and they have Sharia certification alongside what they do. But that's really because they have a belief that what they're doing is ethical and sustainable and applicable to the mass market, not just to the Muslim market. Final question for both of you, and I like this question. If you're both successful with the strategies that you've outlined, where will Kuwait FinTech be in 10 years' time? Tariq, maybe to you first.
Where Kuwait FinTech will be in the next 10 years. I think today is touching every aspect of our life. It's become an integral part of our economy. You can feed yourself, clothe yourself, transport yourself using just the fintech phenomena that we have here in Kuwait. And where we're going to be heading next, it's into the unknown. But rest assured that we have people like Ali that put the rail and make sure that we have our central bank regulation and every employee in central bank. And now the new doors that open for the new economy is ready to take it. So where we're going to go to the unknown, and we're going to enjoy the ride. Let me put it this way. And it's going to be a journey that everybody's going to take.
And Ali, for you, where will tap payments be in 10 years, or where will you be? Will you still be, pioneering the world with tap payments, or looking broader into fintech?
I would prefer talking about how fintechs from Kuwait
should
be, actually. I think it's very positive. We already have a lead start. The number of fintechs that are coming out in the region, in Kuwait, within the region, being such a size of a market is already a good number, a very good sample. We have a lead start over the neighboring markets because of the central bank. It's because we are letting those type of activities to take place and evolve while monitoring them. So there's a lot of innovation. The only change that should happen from fintechs in Kuwait, we should think Kuwait is a starting place, and let's grow Kuwait into the region. Let's grow into serving the whole region, being based in Kuwait. This is the next step of every fintech, I believe, and that's where the future is.
So thank you. All that remains for me to say is thank you, Your Excellencies, for having us at GIF. Thank you to my panelists for a very engaging discussion, and thank you all for your attention.
عضو اللجنة التنظيمية, we would like to thank you first for being part of this successful panel. The last words was to make Kuwait maybe the Switzerland of the Gulf. That would be nice for us to have.
Sure.
So have Abdul Hasib.